Hey guys, Sean here, and welcome to the F1 Word, powered by planetf1.com. Now, Formula One has always been in pursuit of improvement, and that has resulted in many records tumbling over the years. However, there are a number of records, some wanted and some unwanted, that are unlikely to ever be broken. So in this video, we'll take a look at just 10 F1 records that may never be beaten again. So first up, over the years, we've witnessed many periods of domination from the likes of Michael Schumacher, Sebastian Vettel, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. However, none of those drivers have ever come close to troubling the record for the biggest race-winning margin. That honour goes to both Jackie Stewart and Damon Hill, who on lap counts took victory by over 2 laps in attritional races. Those are the 1969 Spanish and 1995 Australian Grand Prix, respectively. In terms of overall race time, Stirling Moss won the 1958 Portuguese Grand Prix by just over 5 minutes. Wow, with the sport being so reliable these days, and indeed the push for performance parity, it's surely unlikely we'll ever see such a winning margin again. The 1997 championship deciding finale at Jerez will always be remembered for that controversial incident between Jacques Villeneuve and Michael Schumacher, but something else happened that weekend that left everyone bemused. Schumacher, Villeneuve and Heinz-Harald-Frentzen somehow managed to all set the exact same qualifying time of a 1 minute 21.072, and under the regulations which still exist today, the first driver to set the time takes pole position, so first come, first served. Villeneuve set his time slightly earlier in the session and so took pole and was followed by Schumacher and Frentzen. And although not quite as spectacular or surprising as 3 drivers tying at the top, at the 2024 Canadian Grand Prix, George Russell and Max Verstappen also set the exact same time of a 1 minute 12 flat, Russell taking pole and Verstappen P2. So given you can't get any closer than 0.000 seconds, the closest battle for pole is a record that should stand forever. The current record for winning from the lowest starting position belongs to John Watson, who won the 1983 United States Grand Prix West from 22nd on the grid. Oh yes, the then McLaren driver came back from a poor qualifying performance and took advantage of a tough race up front, and a race that saw just 11 drivers make it to the end to win ahead of teammate Niki Lauda, who himself started down in 23rd place. That record is quite literally impossible to beat right now, as there aren't 22 cars on the current grid, but even with Cadillac set to join the grid and become the 11th team in the near future, that record can only be equalled. If it is ever to be beaten though, the sport needs another new team to join and for someone to have a driver or a car that is quick enough to make its way back from a poor qualifying session or a race of absolute chaos to stand any chance of setting a new record. The Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal, home of the famous race win by Jenson Button back in 2011, holds the record for the longest total race time in F1 history with a duration of over 4 hours and 4 minutes, with more than 2 hours of that time due to the heavy rain that delayed the race start. However, as a result of that race, the rules were tweaked to avoid such a scenario again, and F1 now imposes a 3-hour time limit from the start to the end of the race itself needing to finish in no more than 2 hours inside that 3-hour window, which allows for things such as red flags. But that rule hasn't stopped delays happening, as we saw at the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix, where the stewards used their powers to temporarily stop an event which allowed them to suspend the race clock on grounds of force majeure. Let's not get into that one though. Max Verstappen made his Formula One debut in 2015 at the age of just 17 years and 166 days, making him the youngest driver to ever start an F1 race, and at his second F1 start, he also became the youngest driver to score points in Formula One. Not long after he made his debut though, the rules around obtaining an FIA super license were changed. So as well as the usual points drivers needed to pick up through performances in other racing categories, they now must be a minimum of 18 years old in order to obtain a license. Now, that isn't necessarily a hard and fast rule, though, as the FIA have given themselves a bit of leeway, which allows a 17-year-old driver to hold a super license in exceptional circumstances. So, although we have yet to see it, that wiggle room could see the record broken, but given the FIA has yet to budge on that rule, it is still unlikely that Verstappen's youngest driver records he set at 17 will be beaten. Sports evolve massively over time, and that means that more often than not, the average age of competitors drops, and it will come as little surprise that that is the same when it comes to Formula One. Many of the sports records for the oldest drivers to claim accolades, such as oldest race winner, pole sitter, and oldest world champion, were set in the very early years of the World Championship's existence. Absolutely, Fernando Alonso has broken the mould as he continues to race competitively when the car allows at the tender age of just 43. But even in his case, Fernando will need to race for several more years before he has the chance to break any of those older driver records. For example, of the accolades already mentioned, Giuseppe Farina was 47 when he set the record for oldest pole sitter, Luigi Fagioli was 53 when he became F1's oldest winner, and Juan Manuel Fangio continues to hold the record for being the oldest drivers' world champion, having taken his 5th title in 1957 at the age of 46. From 2026, F1 will have 11 teams and 22 cars on the grid, but that is still a long way off the record for the greatest number of cars to start an F1 race, and frankly, the sport will never get close to breaking this one. The 1953 German Grand Prix held at the Nordschleife was won by Nino Farina and had 34 cars lining up for the start of the race, although only 16 finished. In theory, F1 could have that many again, but from a practical point of view, for example, the logistics and the fact most circuits wouldn't be able to accommodate that many cars, it's not going to happen, not least because the current regulations only allow for a maximum of 26 cars. The record for the fewest drivers to finish a race goes to the 1996 Monaco Grand Prix. Now, 7 cars were actually classified, but only 3 saw the checkered flag. Surprise winner Ligier's Olivier Panis being joined on the podium by David Coulthard in his McLaren and Sauber's Johnny Herbert. Crashes and mechanical problems plaguing the rest of the field in a race of mixed conditions. In modern day F1, it's not totally uncommon for the entire grid to make it to the end of a race, and although it is very possible a chaotic race like Monaco 96 could crop up again, it's tough to see how we come close to seeing such a low number of finishers. I suppose that's another one for the unlikely list rather than the totally impossible one. Formula One hasn't always been the reliable sport it is now. Once upon a time, even if a race appeared to be coming to an anticlimactic finish, there was still a chance that an engine would explode, a gearbox may give up, or a brake disc could fail. In an era where a lack of reliability could dictate a team's season, Andrea De Cesaris went more than 1 whole year without seeing the checkered flag. He went a whopping 18 races without completing a Grand Prix distance between France 1985 and Portugal 1986, and that's only counting the races he started. It's 19 if we include his failure to qualify for the 1986 Monaco Grand Prix. In fact, his P8 in Mexico that same year was the only time he managed a full race distance until Detroit 1988. Interestingly though, not all of those were logged as DNFs as he completed 90% of the race distance, most notably his P3 classification in Belgium in 1987, where his car ran out of fuel in the closing meters of the race, but De Cesaris kept his podium place because the cars behind did not finish on the same lap as him, so whilst classified, he still didn't see the checkered flag. And finally, the current power unit penalty rules are seen by some as a bit unnecessary and even confusing at times. But things used to be far more complicated than they are these days. In 2015, the second year of the turbo hybrid era, Honda were, to put it mildly, struggling with both performance and reliability. They were frequently fitting new components to the McLaren cars, and at the 2015 Mexican Grand Prix, they managed to set the record for the biggest F1 grid penalty in history. They changed numerous parts on Jenson Button's car, which saw the Brits slapped with a whopping 70, that's 70 place grid drop for the race, made up of 3 10-place grid penalties and 8 5-place drops. Thankfully, things are simpler nowadays with a driver just told to go to the back of the grid if too many changes of power unit components are made, although it can still be a bit confusing at times when several teams decide to make a ton of changes at the same race weekend. There we go then, they were just 10 F1 records that may never be broken again, but can you think of any more? You can let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below, and for the latest Formula One news and reaction, head on over to planetf1.com. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.